Good morning, Seller Sessions. I always say good morning because I'm usually in California, but I just happen to be in London for my first time ever. And I have this wonderful human with me, Mr. Lackey. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I'm a big fan of London, so it's nice to hear that you're there.
Yeah, first time ever. Danny McMillan, the wonderful host of this podcast, invited me for Seller Sessions Live, which was absolutely phenomenal. It was a very, very nice group of people that I usually don't get a chance to talk to because they're all in Europe. So for the first time, I am here with them. So it's definitely different because I am from Romania, and I left Romania about 18 years ago, 19 years ago. So, and I go back home every 2, 3 years. But it's even here in London, I'll tell you, I still feel that European mentality a little bit, where it's like things are not as smooth as in US. And then I'm like, yeah, I remember now why I left. And again, London is like amazing. It's a super city. So how do you find London? You love it?
Yeah, I love London. I think we've been very fortunate to travel pretty extensively in Europe and even live abroad. And London is such a kind of quote easy city for Americans because obviously the language, it's pretty efficient, it's pretty structured. I prefer as you go, and I haven't been to Romania, which I'd love to go, but as you get into the Czech Republic or Slovenia or some of the more Eastern countries, it starts to feel very different. London feels pretty similar to the U.S. In a lot of ways, but yeah, I really love London, and actually it's a direct flight for us, and so a lot of times when we're going to Europe, we have to fly into London first, and we'll tend to spend a day there, coming or going. So yeah, I'm a big fan of London.
Yeah, that's really great. The only time that I can see everything you said. It's very Americanized in the sense that beautiful restaurants, beautiful people. But one thing that happened today, so I brought my laptop because I knew I was having this podcast, and I didn't bring a transformer, for the electricity. So I went to look for a different adapter. And first of all, the person wasn't really helpful at all. I said, "Do you know if this works?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. Like, it's on you if you want to buy it." And I said, "Well, can you, like, if it doesn't work, can I bring it back?" "No, absolutely not. Once it's open, you cannot bring it back." And I said, "Well, how would I know it's going to work if I don't test it?" He's like, basically they don't want to talk about it. So
Right.
that's what, in Romania, you walk into a store, you don't return anything back.
Right.
So, and it wasn't expensive. It was, I don't know, $20, $30, but it was just interesting. It brought me back to like, oh yeah, I remember now. So, but London, it's beautiful. The architecture is absolutely stunning. It literally looks like somebody's like painting it. As I walk by, I'm like, oh my God, that building is cute and that building is cute. So it's just great to be here. But for those who don't know you, which I'm sure a lot of people do, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm one of the 8% of the population here that was actually born here. Charlotte's been kind of a big growth city, became the second largest banking center in the U.S. behind New York. So it's had tremendous growth. But my life has been really in two big buckets. The first kind of part of my life up through college was all about soccer, or, for international fans would be football. That was really my passion growing up. All my goals and dreams were soccer related. And in a lot of ways, I was fortunate to kind of check the boxes. I played, in college, I was an All-American. I played professionally briefly, but I was too early. I was before MLS, before a lot of the opportunities that Americans finally have in the soccer world now. So I'm jealous of this younger generation, but that really dominated my time and interest up until in 1994, I stopped playing, joined a startup, a little tech startup. I wasn't really qualified to do anything technically. I was a psychology major. I didn't take any computer classes in college. I didn't take any entrepreneur classes. I didn't take any business classes. So I was hired in a startup in the marketing department, and literally in the first day, I just fell in love with the energy of this startup. It was day one, we're writing some copy for a marketing campaign. Day two, we're learning to write code. And day three, we're taking out the trash and packing boxes. I mean, it was just, every day was different. There was so much energy. So shortly after that, in hindsight, I realized it was just, being young and naive, but I convinced an engineer that was working in this company about 6 months after I started to leave with me. We resigned, started our first company in the first quarter of 1995. And we started an internet company shortly after Netscape launched the commercial web browser. So we were incredibly early in Web 1.0, as they refer to it now. And so that's how I got started as an entrepreneur. From that moment until 2018, I started, scaled up, and exited 6 companies. And so I was really fortunate to have a number of, 8-figure exits in my 20s. I, really had just an amazing journey as an entrepreneur, but I was effectively heads down for 25, 26 years. All of my time and energy was either focused on whatever company I was building at the time or my family. And then everything else was kind of out the window. I didn't go to events. I didn't go to trade shows. I didn't speak. I didn't do anything. And so finally, I've kind of lifted my head up and said, wow, I made a lot of mistakes, did a lot of things wrong, but I had a few nice things along the way. And I am really motivated to kind of help other people on that journey now. So that's kind of where I find myself today. So that's the very fast version of the last 25, 26 years.
So the 6 companies that you exited, were they, you started one, you scaled it, sold it, and then started the next one, or some of them were at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of my companies were sort of back to back. There tended to be a little bit of overlap simply because as I was thinking about starting my next company, or I was getting excited about an idea, it was one of the motivations to sell the company I was currently running. And so I found myself over the years, there's 2 very distinct type of entrepreneurs. One that starts a company that they're passionate about or they believe in, and it's really their baby, and they run it for many, many years, and then everything is tied to that. Mine was a little bit different in that I was always curious about a lot of different things. I was really motivated with new ideas. And I always felt like if someone offered me enough money, I would sell anything tomorrow. I mean, not that I didn't love it, but it was really just a business to me. And I knew there was another one behind it. I was always excited about the next thing. So most of my companies, I would sell one and the other one was kind of already getting started. It was at least in my mind. And then I would focus on it until I sold it. So there was a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, they were sort of back to back over the last 25, 26 years.
How are you able to detach that emotional side of it? Because most of the entrepreneurs that I meet, especially in the Amazon space, they tend to hold their businesses very dear and near to their heart. And I see this a lot where they will hold it past the point of selling almost. Right. And they just hold it because that's their baby and they're missing out on all these opportunities. Do you feel like that's a very common trend? Because you work with a lot of entrepreneurs who'd like to exit at some point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the huge, misconceptions is, when you're ready to exit, you can sort of put the flag in the ground and say, hey, I'd like to sell my company. There's only about 20% of companies that are even trying to exit that get to the transaction on the other side. The percentages are not great. And there are very few of those that even maximize value. So one of the things I believe in very strongly, and I work with a lot of founders today, is you have to be very thoughtful, intentional, and proactive in order to create that option in the future, whether it's a year or 2 or 3 years in the future. You can't really just wake up and say, hey, I want to sell my business and have a great outcome. It's rare. So I believe, to your point, some people are really focused on their companies. They love it. They're passionate about it. It's their baby. And then something happens in the world. They need to sell their business because they need to retire, or they need money for a house, or they're getting married, or there's some life event, or they're God forbid someone's sick and they need it, they have to, reduce their time. There's lots of things that sort of force people to need or want to sell. And I'm a big believer in it's better to think about all that stuff in advance. What are the macroeconomic environments looking like? What are the industry trends? I mean, Amazon is a great example of right now. We're in the middle of a very, very aggressive consolidation of Amazon businesses because private equity has deployed billions of dollars to buy up and aggregate all of these distinct Amazon businesses under different umbrellas. And you don't have to sell into those, but it would be sort of crazy, in my opinion, not to look at that trend and say, there's a big wave coming now, and that wave will stop. And on the backside of that, you can do one of two things. You either missed it because you needed or wanted to sell and you missed the window, or you say, you know what, I'm going to wait for the next one. I'm going to build even stronger while everyone else is distracted. I'm going to wait for another one a couple years out in the future. So I just really encourage people to be thoughtful and intentional about it versus being so attached to the business that they miss these really important signals that are happening all the time. And, thank goodness, for my message, at least I should say, COVID really was an eye opener for people that thought people in my position were crazy for talking about how quickly things change. I used to always talk about, I was running a business when the .com bubble burst. I was running a business when the financial crisis of 2008 happened. I was, running a business when 9/11 happened. All of these, what they call black swan events, fundamentally change business overnight. And if you're not prepared for shifting, markets, then sometimes people get caught into bad position. And COVID was really an eye opener for a lot of people that didn't really, now it benefited a lot of Amazon companies. So, but there are things that can happen at any time that will change the dynamics. I think right now, a lot of people would say global supply chain and inflation looks pretty obvious. There's going to be some challenges in the supply chain. What is the impact of that on your Amazon business? And if you're not proactively thinking about that, then it could have a big impact on your exit. So incredibly long answer to your question, but I think it's important because for me, I was very, very tuned into those things for whatever reason. I was always looking at my industry, thinking about trends, thinking about dynamics that were shifting. One of my companies that I loved, I absolutely was passionate about it and thought I was on to a giant, multi-$100 million opportunity. I started seeing some trends in the industry that made me nervous. And so we ended up selling the company to NBC Sports probably early because I was really convinced that the space would consolidate. And in hindsight, I think it was the right decision. I sold an international travel business in 2018. And then COVID took that business from a 8-figure business down to almost a 6-figure big business overnight. so being in tune with these things, even if you're passionate about something, you still don't want to miss the signals. And that's kind of how I think about it.
That is a great answer. And I wish more people will start looking into that. And you mentioned briefly about, the aggregators being in the space. What is your thinking around that? Like, how long do you think this aggregator and all this money flying in is going to last if you were to project?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a complete guess, but I think if you look at history as a guide, when large institutional capital sees an opportunity, they tend to pile into the space. They bring billions of dollars, and there's a lot of money right now being, looking to be deployed. And so my guess is, you probably have from today another year or two of money coming into the market. But, in that sort of bell curve or cycle, if you will, a lot of the really, really early transactions have already happened. People have already exited their companies. A lot of the best transactions will happen soon, in my opinion. The next 6 to 12 months, you'll see some of those holdouts that were getting really big and weren't quite ready to sell. They're going to get real premium deals. People are going to offer them a lot of money that they can't, say no to. And then as you kind of get to the top of that curve, then it's people getting desperate. Like, I will sell at any price. I need to get out. So I think, although there's some time for sure, I think years of money piling into the market, the really, really good transactions, in my opinion, again, total Mac point of view of the world, is in the next, 12 months or so, maybe 18. And then I think you'll start to see it, the premiums will go down. It'll be a little more distress. And then you go through a period of consolidation where all those private equity firms have bought a lot of companies. All of those little individual businesses are trying to integrate and figure out how to work together. And, there's kind of a consolidation phase and integration. And then as soon as that happens, new entrants will come back into the market. Some of the people that sold my very first company, I sold into a roll-up. The business that acquired my company did 34 acquisitions, went public. And then a lot of entrepreneurs, just like myself, I resigned the day after the IPO to start my next company. One of the other individuals that resigned started Wayfair. If you know that multi-billion-dollar company, he was a peer of mine that sold his company just like I did to the same buyer. And so all these entrepreneurs that sold after a short period of time went back out into the market, started new things. And a lot of the people in the Amazon space, again, I would be speculating, but I think a lot of them will say, I sold my first company and I did well, but now I've learned a lot and Amazon has changed. I'm going to go start a new one, taking everything I learned, and they're going to become competitors to, the private equity firm that just acquired their business after their non-compete ends. And so you're going to see another kind of cycle happen. So that's how I look at it.
What do you think is going to happen to all the aggregators? It seems like there's more and more showing up overnight almost.
Yeah, I think, the way investment capital works is there are a lot of smart investors. So this is not meant to be, I'm overly stereotyping, but there's a lot of amazing investors, but the really, really good, smart ones come in early with great strategies and they buy great companies and they do great things. And then you have this kind of second wave of enormous amounts of money. They're just following what the other people did. They're not really doing their own homework. They're just like, okay, Amazon is hot. We need to aggregate. We have hundreds of millions of dollars to put to work. And so you kind of see this second little wave of money come in, not quite as sophisticated or as thoughtful. And so I think some of these aggregators, some of them that were early, are going to do really, really well. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get really big, really strong. And then some of the later ones are going to come in and they're just going to throw as much money as they can at it. Now, if you're a seller, that's not necessarily a bad thing because you can sell into a market where they're throwing a lot of money out. But if you really look at it like, am I building a legacy business? Do I have something that I'm selling that has duration to it on the backside, even after I sell? Then you need to be a lot more careful about who the buyers are, what their vision is. And I think that's the risk of a lot of money piling in the space. They'll start doing deals that are not great.
Because right now, people can really get a nice multiple for their business, especially with, more aggregators coming in and trying to outbid each other is definitely
Absolutely.
the bear market for Amazon brands. So what would you suggest that, somebody, let's say, starting to sell today on Amazon, would you say just start approaching that, lifestyle thinking, okay, this is not going to be any profit for, let's say, the next 2 years, with the thinking in mind, I'm going to sell it? Like, what would you recommend to someone?
Yeah, I think, another thing I'm sort of known for, I guess, if you will, at this point is I'm not a big believer in selling companies based on financial multiples. I never sold one of my companies for revenue or an EBITDA multiple. All of my businesses were sold based on strategic value that a buyer was willing to pay a premium for. And so those things are, unique distribution, intellectual property, things that you've done that are really, really strategic that someone's like, I have to have that. And so, I think right now, you're exactly right. What a great time to sell a traditional Amazon business that's doing well. Some buyers don't care if you're profitable or not, as long as you have a niche and you have a lot of momentum. Some do. But if I were starting a business today or even running an Amazon business, I think I would be trying to run a good business. Hopefully it is profitable or on its way to being profitable. But I would be spending more time thinking about how do I create some moats around my company that are really strategic, because if you don't have anything that prevents people from, jumping in your space and copying your ideas and sourcing it better or sourcing it cheaper or sourcing it faster, then it's really hard to differentiate, and it's very hard to get a premium on exit. I mean, that's when you just end up selling for an EBITDA multiple, and that's fine. But I think that means you're leaving money on the table versus the founder or entrepreneurs who come in and say, you know what, we have a really nice niche, but we're going to carve out some exclusive distribution. We're going to carve out some intellectual property so that our brand and our trade secrets and all those things are really well protected, so that when it starts performing well, you've really put some guardrails and some moats around your business that people have to pay a premium for, and keeps more competition out. So that's the kind of stuff if I'm working with someone, I'm sort of beating that drum constantly. Where is the strategic value, and how do we lock it up where it's exclusive or proprietary or unique? Because if you're not doing that, you're in a commodity business that is just sort of you're competing with an open market. And open markets, for a lot of people, you're subject to a lot of money coming in, and people can just outspend you. And that's what's happening with a lot of direct-to-consumer businesses now. When the Facebook algorithms and things change, all of a sudden people are like, it's getting really expensive to acquire customers. And someone else comes in and says, well, I have a lot of money, so I can just spend more and we're going to win. And so that's what you have to sort of protect against.
I see. And so somebody that already has a successful business, they already have an amazing brand, they're doing really well, and they don't really understand the aggregator world, what would be something that they could do now to maximize their profits? Would you say go to a broker, shop around? Like, what are some steps that you would give someone?
Yeah. So the path of least resistance, which is fine and is the path of least resistance for a reason, which is, it's the likely outcome, is if you have a business now that's doing well and you were to go out to the market either directly by reaching out to the aggregators, or you were to hire a broker or an investment banker, the likely path is to sell to an aggregator or a much larger version of what you're doing. So maybe you find someone that looks like you, but they're 10 times the size. My view is that is always an option, but the best multiples and the best exits happen when you go outside your industry and you find someone trying to break in, and you're the way that they break in. So for example, if you're an Amazon business and you're doing really well with a product set, maybe in beauty or sports, and then you go out to the market and say, all right, well, there are clearly some big Amazon aggregators that will pay for my business, but can I find a traditional retailer that's doing billions of dollars, but is not really doing well on Amazon, but wants to be? Or can I find someone in a more traditional industry that needs my tech savvy, my brand knowledge, and things that we feel like we do uniquely? Those are the kind of companies that they're looking to break into your industry, and they're willing to pay a premium, versus an aggregator, which is more likely to just be very formulaic. We pay 6 times EBITDA and we do this kind of deal, and it looks the same every time we do it. There's nothing wrong with that, but I tend to believe if you sell in that kind of framework, you're leaving money on the table, because you can find someone who's willing to pay more. And then even still, you can go back to the aggregator and say, hey, I have an offer for, twice as much as what you're offering me from a traditional retailer. And that gives you negotiating leverage to at least drive the price up with an aggregator.
That's really wonderful. My friend, actually, Mina, he's listening to our show right now. Should I set up a separate entity to own the IP of my brand? Would I have more leverage?
Yeah. So IP is an underutilized kind of strategy, in my opinion. My program, Exit DNA, I bring in an intellectual property attorney typically once or twice a year, just to talk about the value of intellectual property for companies, because there's several different kinds, patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. Traditionally, unless you plan to take that intellectual property and leverage it across a lot of different companies and strategies, you don't necessarily need to put it in a separate entity. As a matter of fact, sometimes that really creates confusion, or maybe even a yellow flag for a buyer, which says, why do you have your intellectual property somewhere else? They want to buy, own, control all the things that make your business great. And if intellectual property is giving you some competitive advantage, then you're going to want that to be part of the business that you're selling. So traditionally, I recommend keeping the intellectual property, very well documented, laid out very well, checked by IP attorneys, but having it in your entity so that the buyer gets the benefit of all that great work that you've done. There, of course, like anything, there's exceptions to that rule, and I have at least one member of my Exit DNA program I'm working with right now that we did decide it made sense to keep the intellectual property separate, and it's going to be part of the negotiating strategy. But generally, I would say it's better to be inside the entity that you would be selling.
Thank you so much for answering that. I hope, I hope you're listening to this, and I hope this satisfies your question. So Exit DNA, tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is it that you do? Are you mentoring? Is it, just give us a little.
Yeah. It's really, I love the way it's worked out because I'll try to make the long story very short, but I sold my last business in October of 2018. I decided at that point, I was just, as all of your, listeners know, it's hard to start a company. It's time consuming, it's stressful. And I had been doing it for 25 years. And I thought, what, I really just am not going to start another new company. I was asked to speak at an event, at a mastermind event, and they asked me to speak about exits. And I said, hey, number one, I didn't even know what a mastermind was at the time. I was so heads down in my life. I didn't really know what this was. And I said, I'm not a great speaker. I've never done that. And they said, we just want you to come out and share stories of your journey. We think it may resonate with the audience. So long story short, I went to this event. I really, truly just shared, stories, mistakes I made, some things that I felt really helped me. And as I was walking off the stage, probably 8 different entrepreneurs kind of jogged up to me and said, Mac, we need your help. And what was really resonating, and it makes sense in hindsight, but as they were saying, look, every investment banker and M&A advisor and attorney that I'm talking to is talking about EBITDA multiples, and they're talking about revenue, and they're talking about margin. And you didn't say that one time in the last hour. All you talked about was strategy and finding great buyers and all of these kind of things. And, would you help us? And so I ended up, I was like, okay, great. I can help people. That's what I wanted to do after my exit. And so I started this program called Exit DNA with the simple idea. I wanted to help founders and entrepreneurs create the option to exit. That way they would feel like they had everything laid out so that when they decided to exit, or if they decided to exit, they would know it was on their terms, their time frame, and it would be at maximum value. Because I know, especially my first company, it was an 8-figure exit. I was in my 20s. It was amazing by so many standards. However, I left millions of dollars on the table because I didn't know what I was doing. I literally had never done anything before like this. And most entrepreneurs, they're amazing at something, right? That's why they're successful. They're engineers, they're designers, they're Amazon gurus, but they've never been through an exit before, and they're going to make mistakes. And so I started Exit DNA with that simple idea. It's evolved now. I work with, probably 60 really impressive founders right now are in Exit DNA, all of which are hoping to sell in the next couple of years, or at least want the option. And it's structured as a small group coaching model. So I tend to do it in cohorts where I pick about 8 to 10 founders. I do live sessions with them, sharing everything I've learned. I do Q&A once a week. It's a really neat model. I have my last one of the year actually starting up in 2 weeks. I know that was not the purpose of doing this, but I do have my last one starting up in a couple weeks. And it's really valuable because I believe I am a founder's advocate. I'm not incentivized. I don't get a percentage of their exit. I don't have any incentive other than helping a founder get the outcome they want. If they want an investment banker, I recommend some. If they need an attorney, I recommend some. I just want the founder to get a great outcome versus, some of the investment bankers or M&A advisors. Again, they're great, they're smart, but their incentive is they want to get a deal done. Maybe not to the best buyer, maybe not to the buyer that's going to pay the biggest premium because they found one that will close faster, or maybe one that will pay more cash. And so that alignment of incentives, I just didn't want to be in the middle of any of that. I just wanted to help founders. And so that's kind of what Exit DNA is.
So the program is just a monthly coaching program, right? Is that essentially what it is?
Yeah. So the way the way it's structured is people join actually for an entire year, and then the first 8 weeks, when I kick off a live session like the one coming up in later in October, it's the 26th. I kick it off. We actually do 8 weeks of once a week, Tuesday mornings. I do a live session because I want to front load as much of this stuff, all the content and frameworks and exercises early on. So we do it once a week for 8 weeks. I present, we do Q&A for each one. And then for the rest of that year, we do monthly sessions where I bring in experts like this intellectual property attorney, but I also allow our members to come through future live cohorts. And so I say, look, I want to teach you everything in 8 weeks, but if you want to come through the next cohort, I don't charge any more. You can come through and go do sessions again. And that gives you a full year to really maximize value. So that's the way it's kind of structured.
And are you, can somebody join your program that is not even thinking of selling, just for the mere fact of like, okay, I want to learn how to position my company if I ever want to sell?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's been really kind of fun and rewarding for me to watch. I've had a few. One stands out in my mind right away. You know, New York Times bestselling author in the health space, sold a couple of amazing books, has 3 businesses, very well-known gentleman. And he said, Mac, it's kind of a lifestyle business. I'm doing very well. I don't know if I ever want to sell, but I certainly want to understand the process. And so we've been working together now for, I think he's been in about 6 months. And he gave me a great testimonial recently, said it was one of the best business decisions he ever made, regardless of exit. But now he's actually talking about selling one of his companies, raising capital for one, because he's seeing the strategies come together with a lot more clarity. So, we do have people. I had another gentleman with a technology company that joined over a year ago, and he and his partners were on a 5-year plan. He said, we're not in any hurry. We want to sell in 5 years or more, but we really want to get it set up the right way. And I love that. I was like, that's perfect. Gives you lots of time to really set it up. Well, we weren't even a year into the process, and he was getting offers that he was like, I just can't turn these down. He's actually closing the sale of his company this month, by the end of this month, just because they learned so much and they really positioned the company where they were getting offers that were so much bigger than they expected that they couldn't turn them down. So, that doesn't always happen, but I love when people they give themselves the permission of time and they just want to learn. Those are great people for me to work with.
And do you feel like, once somebody joins your program and they're a little bit more open-minded to this world of even selling, do you feel like they come in with the thought, you know what, I don't think I'll ever sell. I do want to learn. I want to see the process. And then they see the opportunities and they're like, you know what, I think it's time. Does that happen a lot?
It happens. Yeah. I would say more than people expect, because, when you realize, how to set up your company and how to find the right buyers and all those kind of things click, a lot of times it leads to pretty compelling opportunities. But the other thing that people, I think, discover is, are they the type of entrepreneur who, if you have that next idea, which definitely was most of my experience, I would sell at any time that someone got to the right number, because I was excited to do the next thing. If you don't really know what you're going to do next, then people are less motivated. But I've found that, the fact that we really help people think differently, they're connected to other amazing entrepreneurs in this program. One of our members right now is going to have a 9-figure exit by the end of the year. And just the fact that they talk and think on so much of a larger scale, it's had some of the other founders in our program thinking, gosh, maybe I should double down on my strategy. There's a lot more growth here. So I love watching, just when you change people's view of the world, neat things tend to happen.
Okay. Well, that's, we were talking before we we went live, that I tend to say I love that a lot. Well, that deserves and I love that. Now I'm conscious about it because people came up to me this weekend. I host the seller sessions and they say, you say that a lot. We like it. You just say it a lot. And I'm like, oh my God. We just get into talking, and I wanted to say like 4 times so far, but I caught myself and I didn't. but this one deserves an I love that
Well, I
because
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah, of course. I wish I could say it more, but I definitely love that because I am all about the community. I love being part of masterminds, and this is what I see. Like the latest mastermind that I joined, it's pretty hefty sum. It's quite expensive, but I get to meet those kind of people that you're talking about, like the nine figures. So what that does to me, or somebody that's at like seven figures or eight figures, you might not even consider that that nine figure level exists or that is possible for you because of what you're doing. But once you're around this kind of people, it's almost like it shatters that glass ceiling. It's like it's no longer that thick. It's, you can kind of see the sun now, and you're like, you know what, maybe I can do that. And I love the fact that we are now able to live in a society where we have easy access to this type of individuals. And I'm sure the nine figure one can get the same from somebody else in a room that they may think, I didn't think of that. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yeah, so true. No, you're making such a great point. I love that.
I love that,
Because
right?
yeah, I like I said, was really, and being in Charlotte, North Carolina was not a tech hub. It was very conservative. It was not cool to be an entrepreneur in the mid to late 90s. So I really didn't develop those kind of networks, the masterminds and the groups around me, but I've fully embraced them. And one of the things that I see now, and I use this analogy a fair amount, but a talented founder or an entrepreneur, it's like they're summiting a mountain, maybe not Everest, but they're summiting some big mountain. And most of them are going to be able to do it. I mean, that's the thing, is if you're committed as an entrepreneur, even though the odds are stacked against you, you're going to be able to scale your company. You're going to be able to get to the next level from 7 to 8 figures over time, maybe 9. You can exit if you want, but they're people. And I am this person in one very specific area, which is exits. But they're people on the mountain that are basically standing there going, hey, you can keep going up that way if you want, but if you come over here, we got a ladder on the backside. You can just get there quicker, but keep going if you want. It's like, why would you not learn from someone who's already been where you're trying to go with your life and career? And every time I look at an exit now, I don't have that many talents. I don't ever, I don't have some big self-inflated view, but as it comes to exits, I sit down with entrepreneurs and it's like deja vu for me. I've sold to public companies. I've sold to private companies. I've sold to international buyers. And so when they're telling me their story, I'm like, I know what you need to do. Here's the path. And it feels so different and I've embraced that for my own life now. I've joined masterminds. I go to these events because I know that's where I'm going to up level my life, and my, priorities and goals have changed now. But that's how I learn, is I learn from total gurus, experts. Like, I don't want to figure this stuff out anymore. I'm going to take the fast way from someone who's already made all the mistakes, so I don't have to. And that's a lot of what I try to tell people in Exit DNA, whether they join or not. Like, that's my whole philosophy is, you'll be successful, but I'm just going to give you a framework that's going to help you get there bigger, faster, kind of on your terms. And that's what I want to do for people.
That's a great analogy where you said that, there are ways to get there quicker. Like, let me use this letter because somebody else already done it before you. And entrepreneurs, I mean, we all run different businesses. Like what I do, I have an amazing service that helps sellers rank their products, and somebody else may have a brand, and somebody else has a VA service. Like, we all have different services, different products, but yet we all have this common common ideas. Like, we all want to grow, we all want to be successful. So the common hustle is there. Do you feel like in Exit DNA, you have just different individuals from different kind of businesses? And what do you think like brings them all together that they all have in common?
Yeah. So my yes, for sure. I mean, in Exit DNA currently, service companies, product companies, business to business, technology, SaaS, brands, manufacturing. I mean, a lot of diversity of background, individual company type. My own companies, my 6 exits were, they were very tech enabled, but I had, technology companies. I had a media business. I even had an apparel company, several sports related businesses. So I had a lot of diversity in my kind of journey. I wasn't just a rinse and repeat SaaS person that, I did a SaaS business and then another SaaS business. And so we tend to get a lot of diversity, which is great. What we talk about is applicable across what I call modern businesses. Now, if someone comes to me and says, hey, you know, my family has run a textile mill for 200 years and I want to help them, but that's really not my expertise. My expertise is much more in these modern high growth businesses that are tech enabled, and intellectual property is a differentiator, and they're thinking about growth and distribution. Those are the ones I feel really confident in. I do tell a lot of people no, just because I don't think I can help them. But within Exit DNA, we have a lot of diversity, and what brings them together tends to be this shared view. Some of it is just, my philosophy that they agree with, which is the real opportunity is creating strategic value. It's not about, even though I'm not telling people not to be profitable. I mean, EBITDA matters, revenue growth matters, but those things tend to pale in comparison to strategic value. And a lot of times when I'm doing talks, I'll show some examples. I mean, there's some extreme ones that the media has jumped on, like, WhatsApp being acquired for $19 billion. I mean, there was almost no revenue and no employees. They just had built something that was so strategic that Facebook was willing to pay almost $20 billion for it. Google buys a division of Motorola, not because they needed money or EBITDA. Google doesn't need that at all. They needed a handset so they could be in the mobile phone business to compete with the iPhone. So when you have and create strategic value, that's when you see those crazy off the chart exits and off the chart deals. And even though all of our members are not expecting to get, 50x revenue or anything crazy, they realize that this might be their only exit. For most entrepreneurs, they're very fortunate if they have one exit in their life, and you definitely need to maximize the value of that one exit. And so that's kind of that shared view of there are other things we need to be doing to drive to the best outcome. I think that's why people tend to come join Exit DNA.
That's beautiful. It is, well, as you speak, like 100 ideas come to my mind. And I'm like, oh, I should implement this and I should do this. So I can only imagine how much value the people joining I guess you could call Exit DNA a mastermind in itself then.
Yeah, it's very much structured as a mastermind, simply because I wanted people to join for a year. And even though I'm doing a lot of the early sharing and teaching of my frameworks, they're all connected to one another. We do have a monthly mastermind where I bring not only the cohort you're in, but all of our members can join. So it's really structured so that it's not just about max views, but you're learning from other people on their journey, mistakes they've made. It's really fun to watch. I can sit back in those mastermind sessions and listen to people I'm impressed by. I mean, some of our members are badasses. I mean, they're impressive humans. So I enjoy it just as much as kind of a member as someone who's doing a fair amount of the teaching.
Do you see a lot of people just staying in the mastermind even after they exited?
Yeah, we've had so it's been, really 2020 was the first year that I took it pretty seriously. I mean, early on, I was just trying to mentor a few people and help them. I decided, hey, there's a need in the market. I'm going to structure Exit DNA more intentionally. So January 2020 was really when I kicked it off more seriously. So January of this year, we saw that first kind of group get past the 1 year mark. And I had no plans for a year or two. It was just, you join for a year. And a number of people reached out and said, hey, whether we exited or not, we really want to stay in this group. And so a lot of people kind of rejoin. I make it a lot, less expensive for them to kind of rejoin and continue to participate. But yeah, I did have a good number of people, which made me very happy. But I think it's just, when you're around amazing people, you learn so much, and I'm flattered that people think that I'm one of those people. But, again, a lot of our members stand on their own. They're all really impressive. So.
Yeah, you seem like a very selfless individual. I don't feel like you're that type of person to hold on to somebody even if they don't want to be there. Is there any way to maybe track it? Do you ever look at, let's say, a company and say, have you not been helped, with Exit DNA? Like, you could have sold it for so much less because of this. Yeah,
some of it is very, very difficult to track because you never know until you
exactly
get in the market and sell. But we can take very traditional multiples and say, you know, if someone called me tomorrow and said, hey, Mac, you know, what do you think my company's worth? It's easy for me to say, you know, on average in 2020, the average company sold for 4.7 times EBITDA. If you're a more modern business, it sold closer to 7 times EBITDA. And, you know, I would be really, really disappointed if any member of Exit DNA sold for even 7 times EBITDA. I would expect 10 or much more.
Really?
Now, again, that doesn't mean that's going to happen. It's
Right,
not
right.
always that direct, but the way Exit DNA in my mind is such a high return on investment, I tell people it's, you know, 10 to 100x the cost of membership, because really, you know, if I can add couple $100,000 to the exit value of a company, certainly if I can add millions, it's paid for the program, you know, 50, 100 times over. And so it's almost impossible for me to believe, especially if you're running a 7-figure business or more, like we're going to add hundreds of thousands of dollars just by giving you a few good ideas. I mean, it's going to help. I mean, so, and I hear that feedback a lot, that it's changed the way people are building their business. It's changed the way they're going to market. It's changed the type of buyers they're talking to. Now, did they do an analysis from day one, what they were planning versus post being an Exit DNA? No, but I do think most of them would pretty quickly say, which is why most of my members are, you know, from referrals, like it's clearly added a lot of money to their exit. And then over time, because it's only been a year or two, you know, for a lot of these people, some of them are just now exiting or thinking about exiting. Some may not exit for another year or two. And so I hope it continues to compound. The more time you have, the more value you can compound before you exit.
Do you have a lot of Amazon sellers?
I have a few. Yeah. I have.
You wouldn't say that it's a big portion of your business, would you?
Yeah, I haven't focused on it. You know, I don't, it's not a market. I don't really have a market that I'm going after at all, as much as just trying to, you know, help people. But Amazon, I think is really, really a good opportunity because of the industry cycle that we talked about, the aggregators and the consolidation, but also because it's such an obvious category for the future that now you're going to start to see more companies get squeezed by really sophisticated people entering the space. And so if you're in it now, you really want to differentiate. You may want to exit and start your next one. You know, so I really like the fact that most people I'm talking to in Amazon, they understand that now. They're not just like sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They're like, I need to be intentional. You know, either way, sell or not, you need to be really smart about what's going on in that ecosystem. So I really enjoy working with people that have a big percentage of their business, if not all, in Amazon, because they're really thinking about this stuff.
That's beautiful. Do you ever get the itch of like, okay, now it's time to start a new business? I know you said that you're not going to for a while. It just seems to me that your businesses, the 6 businesses that you exited, they're all pretty different from each other. And now you are open to hundreds and hundreds of businesses and different models that you might not even consider before. Are you ever like, oh my God, I want to do that and that and that and that?
Yeah, one of the hard things, and it's gotten harder, I think, even as I've gotten to this point, is yes, saying no to myself, because I get excited about something and think, oh, I could start that and do that, and I know the right people, and I could, you know, turn that on pretty quickly. And so it's hard to stay focused, for sure. But one really nice thing about Exit DNA, one, I get to live a little bit vicariously through what our members are living and doing, and that's rewarding for me. But the other is, you know, a fair number of them have led to opportunities for me where I've joined their advisory board, I've joined their board of directors, I've become an investor, not because that was ever my intent, but because we have seen, gosh, I could really help them. Forget the exit. I could help them grow, or I could help them think about international, and they've asked me to, you know, play a different role. And I like that because it's only after I've added value and we've really gotten to know one another and there's really good alignment, that feels really natural to me. And I'm not out looking for it, but when it happens, it's great. So I do feel like I'm getting a lot of those opportunities now. And I'm still, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, I turned 50 this year. So I'm, you know, by entrepreneur standards, I'm either really old or really young, depending on your view of the world. So
Well, I think you've done very well, Mac, for being 50 and also looking so young at 50. It seems like
Thank
you
you.
have no stress in your life, probably because you do what you love, and which is quite important. But you can always write a book on 100 best ideas that I've seen that people sold, and that will make you some good retirement money. I don't know. I just, for an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for, not that we're even looking. It's just there's so much out there, and
Oh,
it's like there's money here and there's money here. But again, you have to sit down with yourself and what is the type of life that you want to live in? What is it that makes you happy? Because what I've noticed, I mean, obviously, even for me, it was a long journey going from like zero money, well, $100 that I had, to like where I am now. It's like, would I do that again? Probably not. Would I do that? Yeah, I would probably double down on that. So it's like I see all these ideas, and I owe it my entrepreneur, soul, like, let's do that and let's do that. And then I'm like, okay, calm down and focus on what's important. So I can only imagine being in such a powerful room like the one you run, to have such wonderful entrepreneurs around you. That's pretty much.
Well, no, you're exactly right. I do think the other thing that I feel really strongly about, it's been a big part of my life, is, I mentioned earlier, I really optimized for my business and for my family. And I really feel like a lot of people, I'm just fortunate, and it wasn't because of money. If you looked at my net worth over the last 25, 26 years, I took a lot of risk. I mean, I may have made a lot of money, but then I turned around and piled all that into my next business. But all through that time, I had two daughters, and, right when my first daughter was born, I had just sold my second company, and I was like, I'm not going to miss a thing. I'm going to be home for dinner. I'm going to coach her soccer team if she wants to play soccer. I'm going to be at the class plays. I'm going to, I just didn't want to miss any of that stuff. And so another thing that I've really, really been passionate about is I optimize for that. And still to this day, I mean, I plan my schedule around, having lunch with my wife, and one of my daughters is in college. My other is a senior in high school. So I have a little bit of time left. It's like, okay, do I drive her to school? Do I go to this, dance competition? So that's really important to me and has been a big part of my life. And I also, therefore, really try to tell founders and entrepreneurs I work with, whatever that thing is, it may not be family for you. It may be health. It may be travel. It may be something else. Like, that's not a trade-off you want to make. That thing makes your business better. My companies were built better, more efficiently, more profitable, because everyone knew that Mac was going to go home at 5 o'clock to have dinner with his daughters. Therefore, if there was a meeting after 5, it still had to happen. The business had to run without me. And all of a sudden, the fact that I made those choices to optimize that way not only benefited me personally, it benefited my companies. And so I also think that's a big part of this sort of entrepreneurial journey, is do things you love and design your time around that stuff. Like, don't let the hustle culture that you hear about tell you to delay your life for 5 or 10 years, and you'll ultimately make enough money that you can travel. Well, maybe that doesn't happen. So I traveled all through. I moved to Barcelona in the middle of running a company. I was just like, I'm not going to wait. And so I think that's really important for people. And I spend a lot of time talking to people about that, probably whether they want to hear it or not, because I feel really strongly about it.
Do you think, this is more of a personal question that I am asking myself at this point in my life, which is, could you have both? So my goal, I've been talking about it for a minute. People need to get used to it. My goal is to be a billionaire within 5 years. So my question to you is, could you have both? Could you have the billionaire life and the family life, and you know what I mean when I say that, like that stressful life that people think, oh, if I'm going to be a billionaire, then I have to sacrifice this. So my question to you is, could you have both?
Yes. I mean, I think that is the fundamental mistake people make. And I think your goal and your view of that is an extreme example, meaning the dollars associated with your wealth goals are extreme, right? A billionaire versus a millionaire, or a centimillionaire, whatever the goal might be. I still think the answer is yes. And I think the problem, or the mistake people make, is saying, okay, I need to hustle to become a billionaire, which will give me the freedom to travel with my kids and, do the things I want to do and get healthy. And the reality is, I think making those choices are what gets you to be a billionaire. I think a lot of my success is because my companies were so optimized. It could have easily looked selfish early on. It was like, man, Max, all these people everybody's hustling and Max going home at 5 o'clock. Well, I also stayed up really late and got up really early, but I just was refusing to let the normal schedule dictate my life with my family. Right. And I wanted to be able to travel. I pulled my kids out of school and traveled for 6 months while I'm running companies. But what that does is it forces your team to level up, because they're like, you know what? Mac's not going to be in every meeting. We have to run these meetings just like Mac would, whether he's there or not. Your processes have to get better because they don't know if you're going to be there or not. And all of a sudden, you're building a better company, and a company that runs without you. So when you step in, you can really focus on the things that you're uniquely gifted at, which catapult your business forward, versus you're there, so you run the meeting, you're there, so you answer the questions and take out the trash and get on the call. And so I really think that making the decisions to optimize for these other things actually helps you build a better, more scalable company. And I've I told people I made that decision in August of 2000 when my daughter was born, my first daughter. And the good news is I had an experiment for 19 years. When I dropped her off for her freshman year at NYU, between her birth and dropping her off in college, I built and sold 4 more companies, and I was still at everything. I was at every Donuts for Dad, and I coached your teams, and I went on the trips. And so I think for myself, I proved it's very possible. As a matter of fact, that's what I did. Right. So I do think it's not only possible, I think it's important.
Well, that's a huge, I love that, because that is exactly the answer I was looking for. I like to have this conversation a lot with my friends and people that I meet, and because I want to see how people think. And what I find often, Mac, is that people think they have to choose between one or the other.
Yeah.
They I tell them I want to be a billionaire, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, why would you ever want to sacrifice your life? And I'm thinking, well, I never said anything about sacrificing my life. I don't want that. What I want is, I want to reach that goal. It's just a personal goal and kind of like a bet with myself, because I'm alive once and I want to do it. Just like anybody else has, maybe like a marathon to run. Like, this is my thing. It's like, when did this culture, has this integrated into their mind that to be a billionaire, your family must hate you, all your friends must hate you. Basically you have no life. I'm like, I don't want that. I want to have both, and I'm going to prove that is possible, to still be able to enjoy great conversations at 8 a.m. in California, and still be in London and still have this life. I believe it's possible.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's really sad that, there are people that are sort of driving this hustle culture and telling people to delay their lives. And, what happens, the result of that is, your family suffers, your marriage suffers, your health suffers. And then disproportionate number of those people still don't get to the goal anyway, because you're unhappy and you're not healthy, and all those things that you need in order to get to another level are not there anymore. And so I actually think, again, it's not that you need to make the trade-off. It's you can't achieve your goals if you're making that trade-off. And I mean, most people know, becoming a billionaire, any of those aspirational goals, you don't get that from working hard. There are a lot of people that work incredibly hard, 3 jobs, 20 hours a day, barely sleep, and can barely make ends meet. It's not about working hard. It's just not. So it is about strategy. It's about strategic value. It's about knowing the right people, being really smart and efficient with the time that you have. I would rather work 1 hour a day on the right things with the right people around me than 20 hours a day just, grinding, because the results, I would bet all day long, I will outperform someone working 20 hours a day as long as I'm working on the right things.
Oh my God. I want to talk to you for the next 8 hours. What are you doing for the next 8 hours, Max?
I'll go have lunch with my wife. That's it.
Well, then I will let you go. But before you do, please let our wonderful listeners and watchers, where can they find you? I think you are just an incredible human.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Two places really across kind of social media and on my own website, Lackey.com, MACLACKEY.com is kind of my personal site, and where I share, free stuff on thoughts on hustle and all this stuff we talked about. And then Exit DNA, which is at exitdna.com, is where people can learn more about my program. If they're interested, again, we have this cohort model, which kicks off in a couple weeks. I have a few spots left for that. They tend to sell out. But I would just love to help people. So anybody can find me those two places.
That's beautiful. Well, I thank you so much. I was thinking, walking on my way to the hotel, I was like, what a beautiful day in London. I have to go do my podcast. But I want to tell you that this was absolutely wonderful and loved talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Enjoyed conversation, and hopefully I will talk to you again soon.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.